There were three very big headlines that hit the airways throughout this weekend. The first one is addressing Justin Fields and some potential struggles that the Pittsburgh Steelers backup quarterback has and continues to have that came from Chicago and now stay with him in Pittsburgh. This is from Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Ray Fittipaldo, who said, "Oh, Fields, from what I've seen, they had a month of spring practices, and he's a terrific athlete. But really, the knocks against him that I heard coming in actually turned out to be true. He's not terribly accurate with the ball. His placement isn't all that great. And I could see them maybe having a package or two for him each week, depending on the opponent. But I see this team as Russell Wilson's team." I will agree. I have told to you, I have told to pretty much everybody on this show that Justin Fields at times looks like everything that you want Justin Fields to be. He's running around like a lunatic. He knows how to avoid pressure. He is as athletic as I have ever seen a quarterback. And, I've watched a lot of Lamar Jackson tape. I have got to cover Lamar Jackson to some extent. Justin Fields is right there. He is just as electric with the football. But every other pass is very concerning. And sometimes they're great. Sometimes those passes are right on the money and exactly what you're looking for. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, he shows all the potential that I think everybody wants him to show, and a guy that could eventually turn into a superstar in the NFL. But there are a lot of passes that come off his hand and they are wobbly, or they are 3 feet over a wide receiver as big as George Pickens or Van Jefferson's head, or they're just nowhere near his expected target. And that was the knocks. That was the issues coming into the Pittsburgh Steelers camp and coming into free agency and the trade period and everything when it came to Justin Fields. And I don't want to say that it's alarming, because I don't think that it really is, but I do think that it holds true that Justin Fields is a dude who needs some development. Luckily, I stand here and I've held the same argument throughout OTAs and minicamp, is that I think Justin Fields is in the best opportunity possible to have that development, because I do think that this is Russell Wilson's team. I think Russell Wilson has looked very good with the Pittsburgh Steelers. There have been no knocks on what Russell Wilson has brought, outside of the fact that at times I was saying he's kind of boring. And boring is good, because Ben Roethlisberger was very boring during OTAs and minicamp. Very boring. Those guys who are professionals, who have done this for enough time and who have been in the league and understand how to run an offense, are that smart and just that good, you're not looking for flash. I think you're just watching them run and control an offense, and Russell Wilson has done that. So I don't have expectations that Justin Fields is going to push his way into the starting lineup. Instead, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers view it the same way I do, the same way Fittipaldo does, and the same way a lot of other people who have been at practice do, and that's Justin Fields gets a year to develop and build on the things that he needs to build on, and work with a guy like Tom Arth, who's an incredibly good quarterbacks coach, work with a guy like Mike Sullivan, who's an incredibly good offensive mind, and develop and grow. And that's something that he's never gotten to do in the NFL. He's been tossed into the fire as a guy that he wasn't the first pick in the draft. He wasn't the second pick in the draft. He was a dude who fell a little bit because his talent was there. Everything that you wanted out of this guy is very much so apparent. He just needed some time to become less raw. He's never gotten that time. He's been tossed right into the flames. I think in Pittsburgh, to sit behind Russ and to learn from some great coaches for a full year is going to do a lot of good for this guy. And that's great, because he's 25 years old. He's young enough where you can still develop him into something great and turn that rawness into very productivity, I guess, and very productive play. And that's what the Steelers are looking for. I think it works out perfectly. I do think that there are some issues with this game that are very apparent, but I also think he's in the best situation possible. And the Pittsburgh Steelers did this exactly how they should, to make sure that Justin Fields gets an opportunity to be that guy and kind of negate the negative that is surrounding him right now. Do you feel the same? I know you haven't watched, but you've heard and I've talked to you. Is this the right opportunity? Do you feel that if Justin Fields isn't ready right now at 25 years old, still could become ready over time?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the biggest thing that Ray mentioned, and you mentioned here as well, is the fact that this is not something that is surprising. This is something that people said about him in Chicago. They're the same issues transferring from his first organization in the NFL to his second one. changing the color of his jersey wasn't going to change the issues that he had, but
Yep.
giving him a chance to develop, like you mentioned, is going to be the biggest thing. And especially, Ray put this piece out, and I understand it. You're putting your observations out there, but at the same time, not only is it football in shorts, but
Yeah.
it's also football in shorts where he's working with about 12 receivers. Some people are in today, gone tomorrow, like George Pickens. Cordero Patterson didn't show up to the last week of OTAs, and that's fine. It's what happens. But also, it's about 12 different receivers that he's thrown a combined 0 passes to before arriving in Pittsburgh. So there's a little bit of that mixed in as well. So I think that right now, yes, seeing that there's the same issues, it makes sense to say, all right, well, this is real. This is what Chicago said is real, and it's here in Pittsburgh. And that's just something that from a base, they're going to have to work on. But I'm not overly concerned about it because, like you mentioned, it's nothing new. And they're going to work on that over the next couple of months. They're going to work on that through training camp. And if he is the backup going into the season, they're going to work on that throughout the season with him as the number 2. So I'm not concerned about it in the least. And honestly, it's kind of expected to hear something like this coming out of minicamp.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very expected. I think it could have went 2 ways, and I'm glad that it went, not the third way, because that's where we stand. Is the Steelers could have walked in there and Justin Fields could have been everything you wanted him to be and more, and clearly the number 1 guy, and this is going to be the greatest quarterback the Pittsburgh Steelers have seen in a long time, the next Ben Roethlisberger, so on and so forth. Or it could have been exactly this, which is he needs a little bit of time to develop, but nobody should be concerned about this. Nobody should be sitting around saying Justin Fields' career is over. It should be, I'm very glad that Justin Fields is in Pittsburgh and gets a chance to continue to develop and grow around really good coaches. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers did, was build a coaching staff to develop essentially Kenny Pickett at the time. And that turned into Justin Fields. And anybody who's sitting around going, that's a bad thing, I mean, it's a great thing. You went from a guy who was the 20th pick in a draft class that had really bad quarterbacks to a guy who I believe was the 11th pick in the draft in a draft class that was filled with great quarterbacks, where he was potentially a top 10 pick, maybe higher, maybe a top 5 pick if he was a little less raw, if there were a little less question marks. The Steelers put him in a place to develop. The third option would have been that he walked in here and he looked atrocious, and it would have been like, oh man, this is bad. But there's been no signs of that. Even the bad is filled with enough good where you're like, this kid's good. This kid's got talent. This kid, there's no signs of Justin Fields being a concern. You saw that with guys over the years. Like Mitch Trubisky walked in here, and I get it, later in his career, he was pushing 30 at the time. Mitch walked in here and immediately you were like, oh, I don't know if Mitch Trubisky could be saved. I don't think that could happen. Even Kenny at times looked good, but at other times you were like, there are some issues that it's almost Tim Tebow's the great example here of some guys just aren't going to get over the hump, and they're just things that you're just not ready for this. You're not going to be ready for this. Justin Fields has none of those. Justin Fields is a dude that you could just look at and say, if he was a rookie, you'd sit him and say, this dude has so much potential. And that's where the Steelers are, is he's just got to get coached. He's got to get things corrected. He's got to get his eyes better. He's got to, just like you said, adjust to the people in his room and around him and on this coaching staff. And to have a full year to do that, or even just the rest of the summer, if that's where we want to start here, is just the rest of the summer is going to be really, really good for where he can go in the future. I got no issues with Justin Fields. I get Ray's take and I agree with it, but I don't think it's a negative. This is a diss to Justin Fields, or I'm here to slam Justin Fields. I think it's everybody should lower their expectations this summer for him, because you don't want to go into training camp thinking he's going to blow everybody away. But you should sit here and say, there's a lot of upside. There's a lot of potential in what the Pittsburgh Steelers could get out of this quarterback, and it's going to come. And that's very, very exciting.